Hello and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT video. The new set, Galaxies, is nice, fresh, and finally playable on the live servers. We're sure everyone is having a great time learning and playing with all the new synergies and champions. But for those of you wanting to dive into ranked, we're here today to give you 10 tips to help you win your ranked games. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, back to the video. Our first few tips will be about ways to manipulate the economy to your advantage in set 3. The first tip is about the importance of having a win or a loss streak. Several changes happened to the economy in set 3, one of which was the reduction of wins and losses required to hit a max streak. Previously in set 2, it required 7 wins or losses to get an extra 3 gold each round, and now in Galaxies, it only requires 4 of either. Basically, this accelerates how quickly you'll be making gold, whether you're on a win or a loss streak. It's incredibly beneficial to be on and maintain a streak as you get a ton of additional gold. Try to play for a streak early game to help with gold changes, as in general, you're going to be making less gold throughout the early rounds of the game, and getting an early win or loss streak will boost your economy. Keep in mind, you shouldn't be on a loss streak for a long amount of time, as you will slowly bleed away your health, but with player damage changes, you can safely lose streak for quite a few rounds early. Win streaking is by far the best way to play now at any stage of the game, since it's much easier to get to. Another important aspect of streaks to know and utilize is now you will earn gold on PvE rounds. Try to plan around this by maintaining your loss streak until after the PvE round to maximize the gold you earn from it. On to the second tip regarding economy, there's much less gold in the early game, so plan around having a slower economy. Before Galaxies, it was possible to continually buy out early shops, as you had a good amount of gold between a higher passive income and being able to sell your starting carousel champion for 2 gold. But with the changes to the economy, you will make much less passive gold and only have a 1 cost champion to sell. This means you'll have to make decisions a bit more wisely and planned out for your early game. Look to buy strong early synergies like Cybernetic or Frontline Vanguard to make up for a lower amount of gold. If you're unable to get any 2-starred, it may be a good sign to try to loss streak to make additional gold. Leveling can also be much more costly, so make the decision early on if you want to go for a win streak by leveling aggressively to 4 and 5 before Krugs, or play it slower and hold onto your gold for a better economy. However you wish to play, it's crucial to be more decisive early game instead of buying everything. 2-cost champions are much more defining to your early game than in previous sets as well, so tailor your plan around what you find. Moving on to the third tip is one that is less about the economy and more about making use of it being a fresh set, as playing for 3-star champions is easier right now when there's less champions. With it being a new set, there's less champions on release than at the end of a set. For example, set 2 ended with around 58 champions and set 3 was released with only 50. While that doesn't sound like much of a difference, it's actually a lot when it comes to rolling to 3-star your champions. It's the best time to look for 3-stars, since the saturation of each tier is less than it will be when they add more champions in future patches. The best way to utilize this concept is to plan builds around the idea of looking to 3-star a 2 or 3 cost champion. In particular, builds that use them, such as Star Guardian Sorcerer, where you can get 3-star Nico, Ari, and Syndra, or Infiltrator builds using Shaco and Kaisa. This concept also works well when combined with your streak system and lower player damage in the early and mid games, as you can get away with losing health in order to roll for upgrades while you're still getting a good amount of gold. Moving a bit away from the economy focused tips, our fourth tip touches on the changes to player damage, as you can pivot much easier with lower player damage in set 3. The way the damage system works now is that you overall get punished less losing in the early and mid game and punished much more as the game goes on longer. Knowing the base stage damage you will take can help you do pivots when you scout and find that the champions you're looking to play are being contested. For example, Jinx is quite popular in the current meta for Brawler Blaster, so if you were gunning for that build and you only have 1 Jinx, scout to see that there's 2 other players that have a Jinx too, it might be a good idea to pivot. How drastic you pivot is dependent on what items and other champions you have, but essentially you'll trade health to stabilize and have a more viable composition. This is a bit harder to do if you're on low health or if it's in the late game, but if you're above 60 health in the mid game, you're in an okay position to pivot away from your current build or champion. It can be as simple of a transition as playing a different main carry for your build, or just dropping 1 trait to add another. However you do it, try to do it in as few rounds as you can to minimize your health loss. The 5th tip expands upon the previous tip, as you need to scout to see if if your build or carry champion is being contested. Scouting in general is always important, but it's quite difficult to contest the same build or high cost champion when multiple other players are playing them as well. Especially if your goal is to 3-star a 2 or 3 cost champion, it's necessary you scout to see if anyone else is contesting them. This tip touches on an earlier one that this set is new, thus having less champions in the game, which means there are fewer options for specific carries, and knowing what's taken or being contested is absolutely critical information. Good timings to scout are generally right before any PvE round or the round right before standard leveling times, like level 6 on 3-2, to see what other players have bought or what champions they've upgraded. Continuing on the scouting theme, our 6th tip is to scout for BLITZCRANK. Good old BLITZCRANK is back in set 3, and while he wasn't around to hook your squishy carries last set, he certainly returned to do so now. Even as early as the first PvE round, it's important to scout and see which players have a BLITZCRANK and position around him accordingly. BLITZCRANK will always pull the furthest champion away from him at the beginning of the round, so you can manipulate that by either having a fodder champion or something hard to kill that gets grabbed by him instead of one of your important units. Diligent scouting is the best way to make sure you're not surprised by a BLITZCRANK, so always try to do a quick scout around to check. On the opposite side of that, you should always be scouting when you have BLITZCRANK to get a good idea of what champions you're going to be pulling and whether or not you should move him into a better position. Along the same lines as the previous tip, the 7th tip is be aware of how items and abilities function to best position against them and when using them. There's a ton of items and abilities in Galaxies that have specific wording on them that determine what they will do. BLITZCRANK is of course the most notorious, as we talked about him in the previous tip, but other examples include Graves targeting the champion with the highest attack speed, or the new item Chalice of Favor giving mana to allies within 2 hexes. It can be a lot to keep track of, but knowing how these abilities and items function will make you better at positioning around them. Shroud of Stillness is a new item that will make the mana of a champion it affects at the start of the round be 40% more until they cast their first ability. Positioning this item to hit a high base mana champion can swing the fight in your favor from the get-go, so positioning it properly is absolutely critical. Overall, Galaxies has a lot more intricate wording to abilities than previous sets, so always check what a champion does, and if you're unsure if there will be any special rules to their abilities. Alright, let's talk about a familiar item in our 8th tip, ZEPHYR tricks and scouting. ZEPHYR has continually been one of the best utility items in every set and is proving to still be insanely potent in this set. The general tip is of course scout and make sure none of your opponent's champions are being lifted up by an enemy ZEPHYR, but in set 3 there are a few specific tricks you should be aware of. First is countering the super mech. The way the mech pilot trait works is at the start of the round, before anything else happens, the 3 champions will turn into the super mech. After that is when the start of round effects and abilities happen, so that means if you have a ZEPHYR on a hex that the super mech is going to be on, it will be lifted up as the mech. This is a great way to counter the mech pilot, as your champions will go after other units and generally only the mech will be alive after the ZEPHYR ends. Quicksilver is one of the best ways to counter this if you're continually running this issue when playing the mech. BLITZCRANK can also pull the super mech after he's been transformed if it's the furthest champion away from him at the beginning of the round. Speaking of BLITZCRANK, he uses ZEPHYR quite well. If an enemy is using a fodder champion to bait your BLITZCRANK, you can give him a ZEPHYR and he'll pull the next furthest champion. It's a great way to surprise someone, but keep in mind that others can also do this, so make sure to scout for it. We're on to our 9th tip, making use of new champion drop chances in the shop. Set 3 brought us changes to the shop and the drop rate of certain tiers. There's a lot of tweaks at each level, but one of the most important ones is to know to make use of the increased drop chance for legendary champions at level 8. Previously, there was a 6% chance to find a 5 cost unit in your shop, and when you're a level 8, now it's bumped up to a 7% chance. Sure, it doesn't sound like a big difference, but it's quite significant, as you're going to have a better opportunity to find legendaries when rolling at level 8. It's also important to know that at level 7, the chance was lowered to 1% from 2%, meaning it's much harder to find a legendary at level 7. So with that in mind, going for a fast level 8 is a necessity for any build utilizing a legendary champion. Another change to the shop is that at level 6 and level 7, you have a higher chance of finding 3 cost champions than in set 2. This change went from 30% to 35% at level 6 and 33% to 40% at level 7. This change makes rolling to get your 3 cost champion 3-starred much easier at those levels, which ties back in with our other tip of there being less champions since it's a new set. Being aware of the shop chances is a great way to better understand builds and timings. Here we are at the end of the guide, so let's go and finish it off with tip Tip number 10, how to use and play against infiltrators. On paper, this trait is just another assassin from previous sets, but it's significantly changed from that concept. Assassins would jump to the furthest hexed away, which made them predictable and easy to play around, as you'd often just keep your harder to kill champion in the corners to bait them. Infiltrators, on the other hand, jump to the furthest open hex on the opposite side of them. This makes positioning against them much more difficult, as well as positioning them a lot more interactive. For example, the common placement of the carry was in the middle back row, but if you have your infiltrators on that hex, they will now jump to that carry and begin killing it right away. Always be wary of where you have your important carry position and how many players are running infiltrators. A simple way around them is to just move your carry to the other side or move them closer to your front line if that's safer. Other options include keeping harder to kill champions in the back row or bunching up your back line so there's less space for an infiltrator to jump to. That is going to be it for today, folks. We hope these 10 tips will help you all on your ranked adventures. Be sure to let us know in the comments section below how your rank climb is going and share any tips of your own, since we're all learning this new set together still. We'll see you all in the next video, so make sure you like and subscribe to check out more Giant Slayer TFT content.